Hello and welcome to First Friday Live. I'm Dr. Preston Perry. It is good to see all of you. I am obviously not in the office, as you can see from this background, all the egg foam. This is the soundproofed room or semi-soundproof room for the American Society for Reproductive Medicine. I am at our national headquarters in Birmingham, Alabama, participating in a meeting and some brainstorming for how we can better lead our field. As a result of that, I'm you know, basically, I'm unfortunately without Vicky and Brittany and all my better counterparts, and it's. I apologize for their not being here today. They didn't make the trek. The other thing is, I probably have to say, for while being here, everything I say is on behalf of Positive Steps Fertility and Periscope Fertility, and is not officially a position of the American Society for Reproductive Medicine, and rather is solely our own. We're going to talk about Malefactor fertility. We're going to talk about how do you understand what's going on for sperm, is DAD in your DNA, and what things can be going on to determine whether or not a guy can actually become a genetic father. Before doing that, actually, it's interesting. I don't often bring up the personal, and we've often had we've had some great and amazing things that were personal over the past bit. Brittany delivering, and John Ryan is adorable. He is the cutest boy. There's so many good things. Personally, I had a tragedy this morning. My dog Sugar, we've had for 11 years, just passed away. And we miss her deeply. Hey, Lauren, good to see you. I, this has really taken a bit of a toll today, in case I seem a little different. There's a lot I got from having her. She was a rescue. I'd asked my wife, was volunteering at the Humane Society. I said, you know what? Have fun, enjoy. I'm proud of you, but whatever you do, don't bring your work home with you. Hey, Amanda, how are you? And anyway, I'd no sooner disappeared to an airport and she called me. I had to bring one home. There was a no-kill shelter, and they were going to make an exception for this dog with all these fear issues. And they always take the sweetest or the scariest looking dog and give it the sweetest name. So Sugar is a Rottweiler. And we don't know who abused her. We think it was either Johnny Cash or Will Smith. Something about Men in Black kind of sets her off. But over the 11 years we knew her, there were a couple things that I think applies to. This was my first daughter. For those of us who have pets and are passionate about them, and my only daughter, there are a few things that I'm taking away from having had her all these years. The first is, I think you don't, just by looking at people on the exterior, you don't know necessarily what's inside. She would petrify anyone who saw her as a Rottweiler. She was the most sweetest, loving dog ever. All she wanted out of life was to be petted. Yeah, our other dog, Louis, he just wants food, but Sugar just wants love. I think another thing that was powerful from having had her all these years was that I think some of us, for our journey for fertility, some of the scars that we carry with us are actually make us more whole and more relatable to others. Hey, Brandy, good to see you. I think, for Sugar, I think she had a hard life before we met her. And I think she never forgot that love. And I think she was just all the more appreciative. I think for all of you who are going through the fertility journey, the challenges you face will make you more empathetic and relatable to others. And that's not something to be ashamed or embarrassed of, but to be worn as a badge of pride that you have survived it. We hope and expect you all to make it to the other side. Hey, Aaron. But your vulnerability from what you've been through makes you stronger. And I think the final thing for Sugar, I think, was just how well, let me skip on that. I'm just going to deeply miss her, and I think we all recognize that the power of family is exceptional, and we are just. I'm so privileged to be a part of a great community like the many of you, and God bless and thank you for all your support for others who are going through not just issues like mine today, but for people who are struggling with infertility who often feel they're alone. You're appreciated and loved, and thank you for making a difference. Okay, on to Malefactor. Hey, Brandy. In terms of what we look at for Malefactor, so the sperm are kind of simple. You look at them, there's sort of oval-shaped head, then sort of a cylindrical body, and then there's a wavy tail at the very end. So the head contains the DNA. That's the genetic information from the male. If you have a sperm without heads, it's not going to do anything no matter how well it swims. For the middle part, that's sort of the machinery. Think of it as the engine. It gets people where they need to be. And of course, if it's not, you don't have the mid portion, usually it's semi-dysfunctional, but then if that's missing, that's when things might not swim. And then the tail, again, if the tail is kinked or broken, the sperm can't move itself forward. Those are the tires that get the sperm where it needs to be. And you see various defects or issues with all of these as you go about fertility. In fact, actually, this is something many people don't know. When you do in vitro fertilization and you put a sperm directly in the egg, you kink the tail or sort of snap it so that when it goes inside the cell, it doesn't swim around and tear up the entire egg. And so where what you do with the sperm matters for IVF ICSI. In terms of what we look at for guys, if you're counting sperm and trying to understand what's going on for that, the number we often look at is 15 million total motile sperm. So you have all these sperm, and you think 10 million, 15 million, 100 million, that would be a lot. It takes 10 million sperm in an active intercourse for one sperm to find an egg. You know, guys, we aren't the best with directions. You know, we get lost in the vagina, you know, just doesn't make its way where it needs to be. There are a lot of jokes we can make about that. I won't go into them right now. But again, it's 1 in 10 million making it to the egg. And the one that makes it may not be a good sperm or an effective sperm. So often you need more than that. So often we see with guys for a normal sperm count, about 60 to 80 million total motile sperm. So that means about 6 to 8 sperm find an egg in a given month. And so if a guy is running half the numbers, hi, Amanda, you see that about 3 or 4 sperm might find an egg instead of 6 or 8. That's not a big deal. But as you start dropping below 20 million, so where 2 sperm would find an egg, if you get to 10 million, that's 1 sperm finding an egg. If you get to 1 million sperm, or to 1 million total motile sperm, it means only 1 sperm finds an egg in a given month. And so that means, one every year for 1 million total motile sperm. So that obviously has a really negative impact on things. And that's where insemination, again, escalates things. You take the sperm, wash it, purify it, put it directly in the reproductive tract. It's the equivalent of 50 acts of intercourse for how many sperm find an egg. Hey, Heidi, good to see you. And so, having that goes a long way if you're going from once a year at 1 million to all of a sudden amplifying 50-fold. That means 5 sperm find an egg. It makes an enormous difference. And the lowest I've ever seen is sort of getting around the 200,000 range. That's a 50-fold increase. That leads to 10 million total motile sperm effectively, or the equivalent, which means 1 sperm would find an egg. We've had pregnancies with that. But generally, as you start getting really low, you want to start putting the sperm directly in the egg, and that's IVF. So what can go wrong with things? Why do guys sometimes fire blanks? There are all kinds of reasons for that. And so you look at whether there's a problem with sperm production from the brain, from the signals. You look at if there's a problem with the sperm for sort of being made at the testes, and whether there's a problem for it getting out. And so as a result, if you focus on those 3 things, and then as well as the broader issues for quality that may be affected by lifestyle modification and all those other things, and we'll talk boxers versus briefs, all that other stuff. Okay, for the brain, all kinds of things. And you can have some rare, funky things where the brain just doesn't make signal as a result of surgery or cancer therapy or all these types of things. A lot of what we see that relates to that can actually be either stress related or, again, extremes of exercise or very malnourished. You can see that, guys, the brain says, I'm under stress. I'm not going to make the sperm, and it just doesn't send the signal. And that's actually FSH and LH that do that. And that's the same signal that your brain makes for generating eggs. Hi, Ashley. Good to see you guys. The next thing that can happen is if the brain isn't making the signal or there's a problem in the brain, the next thing can be a problem at the testicle. And you can have it where you've had atrophy of the testicles, you've had undescended testicles. We've seen guys where, again, they've used steroids in the past. You know, all these really buff, masculine looking guys that are, you know, flexing everywhere and stuff like that, they can often be firing blanks from having abused steroids. So the fact that you might look good in a bathing suit or whatever doesn't mean you actually are all that masculine. In fact, it's kind of funny to see all these guys in the practice. You know, so I think society might say they're beta males, but they're doing wonderfully for sperm. And a lot of these really burly guys, not always so much. So it's interesting to see that variation. When you look at the sperm and you find that there can be defects, you also start talking about what are the lifestyle modifications that people have done that could have affected things, by the way. All right, tell you what, before I jump to that, let's talk about getting out. So if you've got the brain sending the signal to make the sperm, you've got the testes that are normal to actually have this. By the way, I've got to be careful with gesticulating. Apparently, there was one time I was talking a lot about testicles. I give a lecture. I keep going like this with my hands as I talked about the testicles. That is probably not the best way to go about things. Anyway, as you start seeing the thing, you start, after you've evaluated whether they can be made, whether the testes have the capacity to generate, you look for blockages of whether the sperm can come out. And this is not just vasectomy, but you can see people with congenital bilateral absence of the vas deferens. So that's the conduit or the path from the epididymis to the urethra, the out escape point, so to speak, for the penis. You can see that you're having the sperm being blocked, from instance, from diabetes. We see guys who've had poorly controlled diabetes in the past, and then all of a sudden they have a very good glucose control. You can find that actually that the damage from before still knocks things out, and they don't have any sperm. It's actually going back into the bladder. In fact, for guys with diabetes, you do what's called a retrograde protocol. You actually have them ejaculate, you look if there's a sperm, and then you actually have them do urinate. And then you look to see if the sperm happen to be in the urine, and there are ways of obtaining it that way. And there are also things you can have for people who've had STDs, and that leads to scarring. There are all kinds of things. And again, some of this will require a urologist for evaluation. But the first thing for guys wondering where they are and where they stand is to get a semen analysis. That's really the basics that every guy should know. You know, do I have the numbers? The next thing is, what can you do for lifestyle to improve your chances? And a lot of guys are just thinking boxers versus briefs. Honestly, I've never been impressed with boxers versus briefs for changing things. I see all these people taking, you know, trying to switch over. And honestly, the only impact the briefs might have, if you have your tighty whities on and you don't look that good in them, your wife might laugh, and then you might not have a chance of getting her pregnant. But beyond that, really, the boxers versus briefs doesn't have that much of a chance. Hey, Mandy, in terms of beyond that, I don't remember any well-designed studies showing that switching from briefs to boxers actually would improve your pregnancy rate. In terms of other things, though, that do matter, I watch for hot tubs. Now, again, I saw this more in Wisconsin because it was so much colder than down in Mississippi. I see a lot more for laptops on the lap. It's interesting. Tablets, not so much. I give a lecture to med students on fertility, and every time I bring up the laptops, you see all these guys nervously shifting their laptops off their lap and onto the table for things. But at the same time, it's not so, again, tablets not so much, because usually the heat is towards the back, towards the screen. But the laptops, where they have a heat vent underneath the laptop, you want to make sure that the guy has a sort of a laptop table going over him, so he's not directly applying the heat to his inner thigh for things. By the way, I didn't mention varicoceles, but that can be an important thing for overheating the testes, where the varicocele is you think of varicose veins for the legs, you can have that in the testicle. And that's more likely to be on just the left side. Personally, I've been underwhelmed. And I say this as a guy with a varicocele, by the way. A lot of guys are saying, oh, I must have that. That must mean they're bad male counts. No, it's not automatic like that. Up to 1 in 5 guys may even have a varicocele. Really large ones can have an effect, but at the same time, this collection of veins where the blood tends to pool and not circulate as well, you can have them treated. But the reality is, imagine losing just one testicle. If you remember how we were saying that 80 million mattered, or it was normal, and then you drop to 40, you still have 4 sperm finding an egg in a month. It's not the varicocele for many people. So you have to sort of figure that out. For what we look at, though, again, laptops on the lap will have that effect on heating. And then you can look at toxins. Smoking can have a negative effect. The extremes of smoking, alcohol, we usually say, eliminate tobacco more than cut out all tobacco. It's not as though the sperm get emphysemic, they can't find their way to the egg. What happens is that it fragments the DNA to an extent. So think of a garbled message you get in a game of telephone. You're 2 people down the line, you get the message, you're 20 people down the line, you have no idea what the first person said. Tobacco garbles the message of the sperm in a way it can't communicate as well. Alcohol is often similar to that as well. And so we watch for, not having more than 1 drink a day. Also, extremes of things, and you see this with drug use, that can also lead, you can have erectile dysfunction, and if you can't deliver the sample, so to speak, vaginally, it's very hard to get pregnant. And so if people have trouble with erections or with having intercourse, we also have to address that as well. Beyond those things, there are a lot of issues that I think are more peripheral. I think, now again, eating, it's not so much having the perfect diet matters. Again, we were chased by saber-toothed tigers for thousands of years. The species is still around. And I always say, if you need a perfect diet to get pregnant, just walk into any McDonald's, you'll see a ton of people. They're surrounded by a litter of kids. They're all eating poorly. That's not making or breaking them. What we do watch for is obesity. And I see this particularly with long-distance truck drivers. That's the #1 group where I see malefactor infertility, where basically they've have these long shifts. They eat a lot to keep themselves going. They have a sedentary lifestyle, so they aren't exercising, and they're in the cab all day. And then what happens is they get these very large thighs, which sort of sandwiches the legs together, and the testes are trapped. They can't exactly man spread within the cab, and as a result, they end up, it's as though the testes were inside, and that the testes being outside, you wonder why they're outside when the ovaries can be inside. For the testes, it'll take you from 80 million sperm to 0 in just for a 2-degree temperature difference. I wondered who would do these studies. Well, they actually did them in the French. They got this magic underwear that was, they wore for 16 hours a day, and it elevated scrotal temperature by 2 degrees. So that was the equivalent of being inside the body, and it just tanked all the sperm. I don't know if I would call it contraception, but for these people, it clearly had a very negative effect on things. And so you want to avoid overheating the testes. And again, we see that for very large thighs. losing weight may matter in those circumstances. I've seen actually a lot of HVAC guys, people who work in attics in the summer, and they just boil the testes as though they were in hot tubs, and then in the winters their numbers actually get a bit better. Um, and then on top of all that, again, testosterone is the number one thing I see for a substance that guys are taking that can have a very negative effect. The other, if you're taking testosterone, the body says, I've got enough stimulant to the testes. I don't need to do anything on my own. And it stops sending the signal that also makes for the sperm. And that's again back to the FSH and LH. So if you're running out of, so if you're using testosterone, that can really have a negative effect on fertility. Calcium channel blockers is another I watch for. It's interesting. Doesn't seem to have a negative effect for the first 2 trimesters for women, but for men, it will make it so that the sperm have trouble binding with the egg. And then also on top of that, another that I watch for is allopurinol. If you have gout, you definitely should get that treated, but then also look at, hey, is this having a negative effect on the sperm? What do you do about all these situations? And again, how can you fix things beyond this? And so there are a couple of options. One is, again, you can just fix the underlying condition, lose the weight, stop taking a calcium channel blocker or switch to something else, stop exposing the testes to heat, these types of things. Some you can't fix, or you have to bypass the natural approaches. And if you've got an outflow obstruction so the sperm can't get through the penis, you want to actually biopsy it from the testicle so that you have a few eggs, or you use a sperm donor for things. The final thing is some people for where there's medications or things where they can only adjust their lifestyle for a little bit, you want these people to actually end up doing sort of optimizing their life, improving it for a bit. You bank the sperm while they're healthy, and then they can get back to whatever medication they needed, and so do a temporary thing for that. Bottom line is there are a lot of solutions for these things. And if you have questions, just ask us. We're happy to help on anything and everything we can. Thank you guys for watching. I'm sorry for starting out with a bit of a downer. The biggest downer, of course, being again Vicky, Brittany, and all the others, not being here. I miss being with my Positive Steps family, and I can't wait to be with them again shortly. But thank you all also for watching. Thank you for also sharing knowledge with others. I tell you, there are so many people out there suffering in silence. You guys are the voices of hope and perspective and knowledge, and you make a world of difference. Have a great day and a wonderful weekend. And next time, we're going to see, we might actually have Brittany doing the next one on her own. I'm going to be in Destin. I might have to FaceTime in for it. For some reason, these first Fridays seem to be always when I'm traveling. But Brittany is definitely going to be leading the next one as she returns from maternity leave, whom we've missed and we love, and so good to have her back. Thank you again, and have a blessed day. Oops. Well, it's still recording me. Really? Goodbye.